Comrades, good afternoon. I thought I should let another minute or two go whilst trying to serenade you with music, because I see now all of a sudden we're having a number of people comrades who are joining in the waiting room. But it is now a minute after 12, and we should get going with the show. So welcome to all of you. Thank you really for joining us in today's UMRABULO dialogue, a session that we hope to do with a little bit of a different slant, if you like, because different to the normal dialogues where we would have a guest appearing and then thereafter engaging that guest. Today we thought that we'd do a screening, do a documentary screening of Oliver Reginald Tambo, which of course talks about our Tambo, gives some sense about his outlook generally, and the overall meaning of what he has meant for us as a country. You know, you will be told time and again that the very constitution of South Africa is a reflection of a thinking and a viewpoint that Oliver Reginald Tambo had. So hopefully by partaking in this particular session, you for yourself will begin to understand where all of that is coming from. My name is JP Lowe. I am editor of UMRABULO, the ANC Political Education Journal, which of course now we're trying to extend in terms of its offering, as you can see now with this UMRABULO dialogue. I'm also a communication advisor at our Tambo School. I'm joined by Comrade Audrey Masemola, who's really helping me in keeping this show properly on the run. My apologies, I keep hearing this tweeting sound. I'll try to switch that off in a moment. But I think let's continue. I hope it's not too irritating to you on the other end that's listening. But I think my system is set up in such a way that every time somebody joins and leaves, we'll be able to hear them. So my apologies in that regard, comrade, but welcome to all of you. I do hope that you are looking forward to the session as much as I am doing. Comrade Sipho Ball is also joining us now, who's also going to help with the administration of this platform, but also looking at what's happening on Facebook. We are not sharing today's session on Facebook as we would normally do. The reason really being that when you try to share the video on Facebook, there seems to be a delay between the audio and the video. So to avoid that, we are doing a little update. As we speak right now, we've loaded an update with a link to the same offering on YouTube. So if you are unable to be on this platform, you can go back to Facebook, the OR Tambo School Facebook page, and then from there also get a sense of what the documentary is all about. Now, as I was saying that in a short moment, we'll be screening the documentary titled Oliver Tambo, Have You Heard from Johannesburg? A film really produced by Connie Field, and also whose screening we've been afforded the right to do so by the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. So just gratitude to both of them for agreeing that we can screen this documentary today. If you don't know what this is, I hope you'll be able to see this, but this is really the documentary, the video itself. And perhaps in introduction, I want to just read off some of what is said in the back of this cover, I think explaining also where this video comes from, the thinking thereof, and what it seeks to do. It says here that Oliver Tambo, which is this particular video, is the final chapter of the series Have You Heard from Johannesburg? So there's a series essentially around this Have You Heard from Johannesburg? And it's the final chapter of the series Have You Heard from Johannesburg, which was originally broadcast internationally on SABC, BBC, and PBS. The series takes a thrilling inside look at the global anti-apartheid movement, its dangers, discouragements, and ultimate jubilation, as revealed through a unique archive of material culled from hundreds of sources worldwide, which could not be seen in South Africa under the apartheid regime. This remarkable saga is told by those who lived it, from giants of the South African freedom struggle, like Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Walter Sisulu, to grassroots activists in over a dozen countries. Have you heard from Johannesburg is the first time this global epic has been told in any medium and provides an inspiring and comprehensive look into a movement whose influences live on today, from campaigns on global warming to peace in the Middle East. So really, I think importantly, the point there being that this is not just a historical account, but more importantly, something which, an offering, which also brings us to the present and helps us to understand our present tense more vividly, if you like. Now, here they also quote Comrade Nelson Mandela, who said this about his law partner, comrade and friend, Comrade OR. Comrade OR paved the way forward with gold, the gold of his humanity, his warmth, his democratic spirit, tolerance, and above all, intellectual brilliance, which in the end outwitted the racists in this country. There is not enough rain in the skies for us to be able to shower on him the honor that he deserves. Comrades, with those few introductory notes, I think we should go over now to the actual documentary. I hope you enjoy it. On the other side of this, if time allows us, this documentary is about a minute, rather 1 hour, 37 minutes long. Our sessions are meant to end by 2 p.m. If time allows, maybe we will take just a few comments from yourself. Enjoy.
Some people were unhappy about my coming here, possibly because they believe I'm a terrorist, they believe I'm a communist, they believe I'm a murderer. Are you a terrorist? What do you think? Well, I'm asking Are you a terrorist or are you? I'm what I am really. I'm just what I am.
Oliver Tambo has been described quite correctly as one of the greatest statesmen of the 20th century.
He was a stoic, he was a person of steel, very gently pushing, not my image of a militant guy.
The humility, the bravery, the intellect.
He always had to be on his guard for murderers. I mean, he was on the death list. South Africans tried to kill him.
As the record comes to be revised, it will be seen how crucial he was to the new South Africa. Without him, it wouldn't have happened.
Oliver Tambo, Oliver Tambo, Teta no Boda, Oliver Tambo, Oliver Tambo, Teta no Boda,
Who are you, Oliver Tambo?
Who am I? Well, perhaps I better start at the place of my birth. I was born in a small village known as Bizana in the Cape Province of the Union of South Africa. And for my early education, I went to missionary schools and subsequently taught mathematics and physics and music. During which time I became very interested in politics.
What the young activists of the 40s had done, Tambo, Mandela, Sisulu, was to move the ANC out of the politics of just mild protest to politics of challenge.
exactly has happened during these last months in the Union.
It was resolved to take active political action against the past laws. People came out in large numbers. As usual, the police were organized and they fired.
Sharpeville.
This was at Sharpeville. And then, of course, the whole country moved in support of those who were killed, and the government responded to all these by declaring a state of emergency under which all sorts of people known to be opposed to the government were arrested and detained.
After the Sharpeville massacre, I phoned Oliver. So we got together and we started talking about the ANC plans when the newspaper arrived with headlines, Congress to be banned. And Oliver turned to me and said, there is a standing order of the National Executive that in the event of Congress being banned, I should go abroad and set up Congress in exile. I said, I'll take you. I mean, it was as natural as breathing in that situation. We had a drive of 1,000 miles, and sitting next to a black at that time was very suspicious. But if the black wore a uniform, then he was obviously a servant and it was okay. So I dressed Oliver in a chauffeur's uniform. He said goodbye to his wife, and we left and drove across the border to what was then Bechuanaland.
The next morning, fingers crossed, I was waiting at the airport. They all arrived, and I met them, took them to meet the various Tanganyikan leadership. And within 24 hours, I had Oliver Tambo out, and he went to Britain.
We looked at our struggles as being fought on two fronts. We were fighting on the home front, but the international front is also very, very important. This is precisely the reason why Oliver Tambo was sent out to mobilize the international world against apartheid.
We, the oppressed, are determined to succeed, but the forces arrayed against us are mighty and powerful, and it is only the spirit of our determination, supported by the freedom-loving peoples who love democracy, that we can ultimately succeed.
The first groups, the pathfinders, people who opened the route, had it very tough because there were so many shortages and you hardly had a penny in your pocket.
I think that the first year must have been a horrendous one, which even I, as living in Britain, I don't think I appreciated.
There were times when he was without food, without the kind of basic needs people had, but you could never see it on him. And was always impeccably dressed, took great care, and just carried this enormous amount of dignity in terms of the mission and the cause that he had.
By that time, Adelaide has come with the children. Appeals were made to people like me, will you help? I know I would say, oh God, I've got to go and babysit now. Why can't they take care of themselves? You know? But literally, he just brought Adelaide there and left Adelaide to look after the family. And Adelaide had to find her own feet in Britain.
Oh, she was terribly strong. She was an incredibly tough lady. And not tough in a hard way, but resilient.
Your husband is away all the time and you're battling on a daily basis to feed your kids. I mean, it was rare, once or twice a year, that he would come. But he understood what my mother was going through, and she did go through hell. And he understood how lonely her life was without him. But he also understood that she totally supported him in the struggle and totally encouraged him.
We're both committed to the struggle. And we knew that we're not always going to be together. And even before we got married, we discussed everything. What we would do if he was to go to jail, what we would do when we have the children, if we were going to have children. But everything that we discussed before we got married involved the political struggle.
And she knew that because of his deep Christian ethics, he wasn't playing around. There was no one else.
I think that they both grew up with very, very deep core values of integrity and steadfastness, and the notion that suffering wasn't a bad thing if you were suffering for a good cause.
He, in that phase, was setting up the ANC structures, headquarters, and offices around the world, and had been in Britain, which had been very important to get the ANC stabilised and represented there, and the anti-apartheid movement going, and the boycott campaign.
Mr. Tambo, what methods of resistance to the South African government's policies is there?
Well, all possible methods, short of violence, of course.
He talked in a way that people here in the West understood. That is in an intimate, humanitarian, appealing manner.
What we want in South Africa is that our humanity should be acknowledged, that those who are ruling in that country should pay some respect to the concept of human dignity. You have 12 million people in South Africa who are treated as if they were subhumans. In South Africa, I should feel that I'm a human being in that country, and I don't feel so now at all. I feel I'm a stranger, a foreigner, and at best, an animal in South Africa. This is how I feel.
He went around to explain who was the ANC, what did we want, and one of the big issues was sanctions.
We believe that sanctions against South Africa, economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions, a severance of even cultural relations like sport are absolutely essential. And we bring this matter as one of urgency.
Sanctions was being considered to be a stupid idea. Who had ever heard of sanctions? The arguments that sanctions are a wild idea, that it's not feasible to implement, too difficult, and it wouldn't have effect on South Africa.
A bitter debate raged at the United Nations. The issue, the projected boycott of the Republic of South Africa.
Mr. President, the Council does not, in these circumstances, have power to impose sanctions. To attempt to do so would be both bad law and bad policy. I cannot exaggerate the sense of grievance, to put it mildly, which we feel towards those countries which are even now doing so much to make apartheid the monstrous and ghastly reality which it is, and which have created in our country the conditions which, if nothing else happens, will ensure an unparalleled bloodbath. Assured of the support of these countries, the South African rulers are not only showing open defiance, they are liquidating the opponents of their policies, confident that big powers will not act against them.
By blocking sanctions against South Africa, what we are saying to the freedom fighters, that the only other option left is the option of armed resistance.
national executive of the ANC, decided to create Umkhonto we Sizwe, and it entrusted to Nelson Mandela the work of leadership.
It is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
Mandela went abroad in 1962 to now brief OR to take him on board fully on the requirements of the armed struggle.
Oliver Tambo himself was a devout Christian. So was Adelaide. So this was going to be a radical shift in their thinking. And Oliver said, I don't want to be having to explain this to Adelaide Tambo, my wife. You, Nelson Mandela, come and explain it, right? Because you chaps at home have taken a decision that is moving us out of the paradigm in which we've been thinking. And you better come and persuade us so that in my own family, I have the space to do what I'm doing, and she won't be questioning why I'm doing it.
He was an extraordinarily Christian humanist who would have liked to live in peace in a small church, I would say, or he would have become a bishop like Desmond Tutu.
What we are asking the world to do is not to solve our problems for us, but to assist us solve those problems. We have tried to ask that that assistance should be given in such a way that we can solve the problems peacefully. That has not been forthcoming. And we are continuing to try and solve the problems with the methods that are available to us. And the stage that has been reached is that the methods that are available to us now are those which we have tried to resist over a long period of time. They are the methods of violence. Because the worst of all horrors in the world is to live forever as a slave, as a hated, despised, subhuman. And this we reject.
And none of the European countries, not the United States, provided any support. Not only would they not give arms to the liberation movements, but they would not even tolerate the idea that the liberation movements had the right to take up arms. But at the same time, they're providing arms to the apartheid regime. The South African military machine was becoming stronger and stronger and stronger.
So, in the course of Mandela's discussions, one of the things that he had to explain to Oliver Tambo was that besides African countries' support for the armed struggle, we would need to depend on support from the socialist countries, namely the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union gave us arms, they trained our people, and that was critical. There was no way we could defeat the regime without sanctions and the armed struggle. There was no way. Without those two elements, we probably would still be struggling today.
Nelson Mandela was arrested for leaving the country illegally. And a year later, we had the Rivonia arrests.
The news, of course, shocked us. Oliver Tambo particularly was so tortured by the whole process. You see, terrible emotions go through your mind. Here they were free and out, and their colleagues and comrades had been picked up.
These are people who grew together in the rural areas of the Transkei. Went to school together, to college together, to university together, opened a law practice in Johannesburg together, started a youth league together. It's together Mandela, Tambo, and then Mandela, one goes to prison, and they're separated for 27 years.
Every single day spent in jail represents a unit of human worth lost. This is a loss we can no longer afford. South Africans are being dragged to the slaughterhouse because they fought to replace racial intolerance and tyranny with democracy and equality.
With the movement having been smashed inside the country, OR had to keep the movement alive, to keep it developed, to keep it strong, to keep it united, both internationally, externally to the country, and internally in South Africa itself.
And it took a long time for him to agree to be called president of the African National Congress. That's the kind of person he was. Extremely, extremely self-effacing, very modest, but extremely confident.
OR had, I would say, 2,000 people outside, the majority of whom have been sent out for training, who are expecting to come back into the country, which was part of the plan.
The military camps were in Tanzania, but Tanzania was too far from South Africa. And then Zambia got independence in 1964. It provided the first opportunity to be able to come down south.
I treated Oliver Tambo as head of state, chased away illegally from his country. We were going to allow them to set up their own organizations on our soil.
OR began to work on a way of infiltrating back into South Africa through Zimbabwe.
We established a special camp in Zambia to prepare ourselves both physically, mentally, and militarily.
Tambo was very much part of the preparation there, and he spent 2-3 months with that detachment as they were finally preparing for entry into Zimbabwe, living with them in encampments.
We had exercises day and night. We embarked on long marches. We had prepared thoroughly for this thing.
O.R. Tambo was very soft generally, very laid back. But once it became necessary to take a decision, he owned it and he put the weight of his authority behind it. On the day when the people crossed the Zambezi, he was right there at the crossing point. People had to tie a rope around a tree trunk and then go down to the channel of the river, down this gorge. O.R. came down also on this rope and stood on the banks of the Zambezi, seeing the comrades off. You had a sense that if he could, he would have crossed with the people.
I was among the first to cross the Zambezi River in a canoe, and we chose the most difficult and impassable part of the river. And we were doing this at night. It was dark.
He stood there, watching everybody go, and shook everybody's hand. Flames could have flown or enemy could have appeared anywhere. I think it was a remarkable act of bravery for him to stand right there to the end.
So when we crossed the Zambezi, this was the realization of our dreams as young combatants. For the first time, we're going to get involved with the real enemy, pitting our strength, testing ourselves against the other side. And we were quite happy. We're carrying our weapons, AK-47, machine guns, grenades, lots of ammunition. And those rucksacks were heavy, but we didn't feel it.
I still remember it was exciting sitting at that meeting. A couple of hundred people are there, and Tambo comes up on to the platform, and then he says, controversies were managed to evade detection for a number of weeks, but eventually there was a firefight with 3 of the enemy dead lying on the ground and no injuries to our brave fighters. And we stood up and we cheered. We cheered. At last, we're fighting back. And behind me, there's a voice, well-elocuted English voice, shouts, somebody standing up, That's murder. And Tambo steps aside, very quiet. He said, yes. He said, yes, we've become killers. Maybe one of the worst things that apartheid has done has been to force a young generation of South Africans who otherwise would have wanted to grow up to be doctors and engineers and nurses and farmers to become killers.
The group fought brilliantly. You cannot exaggerate that. But against the superior air and ground forces of the enemy, they were soon overcome. So they retreated. They arrived back, no heroes welcome, no real recognition that these are the people who started it all.
I was a militant and angry young man. And I found a lot of demoralization amongst our chaps in Zambia. And I began to agitate for seriousness on the part of the leadership.
There was a feeling that leadership was not paying sufficient attention to the struggle of getting people home, of building the movement back home. And Tambo, amongst the other leaders, comes in for criticism, especially from within the camps where people feel they're rotting and getting highly frustrated. And that created a near mutinous situation.
That's when OR then came to address all of us. It was very tense. He said, this is perhaps the worst crisis that the organization has experienced to date.
And this led to the Morogoro Conference of 1969. And a key element was the fact that on that first day, OR announced that he was resigning as the acting president of the ANC. He said, look, for us to do a real renewal, we must now all come down to one size, one level, no leaders, and everybody else was there as equal level.
That Morogoro conference ushered in serious discussions which led for the first time to the formulation of a clear strategy about the waging of a revolutionary war in the country, of a people's war, the need to build the underground, the need for propaganda, the need for mass mobilization.
The conference formally took a decision that all race groups can be members of the ANC. We now were no longer white, black, yellow, purple. We were ANC cadres fighting a common enemy called apartheid.
The executive committee position should still remain black. We don't mind all being in the same bus, but at the steering wheel, you've got to have a black person. And there was never a doubt that when you refer to a driver, you're talking to a Tambo.
And he was re-elected unanimously. OR showed that he could assess the mood and what was needed to keep people together in terms of an integrity of the movement. It was a wonderful example of leadership.
He had a technique of weaving a summary and a gist of what seems to be agreed by taking from every contributor some piece to make them feel that they were crucial to contributing to that decision. This was an enormous art. If you look at other exile movements, over such a prolonged period with no resources, they would just crumble into little leadership fights, personality squabbles, you name it. But he held it together.
If you destroy this government, what are you going to put in its place? The end result will be a communist takeover. And that is the grand strategy, as I've said, of the Marxists.
Our struggle was taking place right in the middle of the Cold War.
We're having problems in mobilizing support in the Western countries. The ANC is perceived as a suspicious organization.
Mr. Tambo, a large number of the members of the ANC who are active operationally have been trained in the Soviet Union. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
Well, the question is, what conclusion should we draw from that?
The only conclusion you can draw is that the Soviet Union has been willing to assist us with the kind of assistance we want. If the same young man had gone to Canada to learn how to shoot, how to handle a weapon, how to fight, we would say that Canada is ready to support us to win our independence. But the reason we go there is not to ask to be influenced by Canada, by the Soviet Union. We ask to be assisted with a struggle that we started a long time ago.
The government in both Britain and the United States didn't want to hear our problem. The Prime Minister of Britain never met my president. The President of the United States never met Tambo.
The government have always resisted speaking to Mr. Tambo and his colleagues because of their unashamed policy of violence against innocent people and their attempt to undermine the South African government.
For that reason then, where it was difficult to approach the government, we approached the citizens.
I think we need to mobilize the masses of the people in each country so that it's the ordinary person who is challenging the positions of his government, the worker who is challenging the practices of his employer. I think this is the level that needs to be cultivated.
I remember the moment I met Oliver Tambo very, very well. We started one of our first campaigns, a huge campaign for the liberation of political prisoners. He came especially for the opening of this huge campaign.
We are confident that whatever the difficulties, our people in South Africa, supported by you all, will see their own cause triumph.
And it was a wonderful occasion. A long, long friendship started that evening. He immediately gave me this impression that, yeah, this was a leader. You know, I'm not so very much into that sort of things. I'm far more, too much, real Dutch, better be normal, and sort of half anarchist. We have no leaders and things like that. But Oliver Tambo was a leader. Yeah, he was impressive.
Now, what can the outside world, what can Holland do?
Sanctions. Isolation of South Africa.
Boycott.
Boycott.
There was a big, a huge involvement of Dutch companies in South Africa. There were strong economic ties. And of course, there were the big multinationals, Philips and Unilever and Shell.
And who are responsible for the policy of apartheid? It is not only the white people of South Africa. It is the great and powerful countries who are carrying on trade with that country. It is the great business concerns who are drawing profits from the sufferings of my people.
The regime had become a polecat. This was a period of intensification of the calls, not only for isolation, but for economic sanctions, for arms embargo, for cultural and sport isolation. Apartheid was declared a crime against humanity by the United Nations. That was sort of the magnitude of the isolation of the regime.
The failure to employ sanctions is to feed the escalation of war. And therefore the West, by not applying sanctions, by
they are creating precisely the conditions in which war must escalate.
More than 50 people have been reported killed near
The flames of Soweto have leapt across Johannesburg. Now the fires are burning in Alexandra, the township on the northern outskirts.
South Africa's worst racial disorder in 16 years still appears to be out of control.
The news stunned and shocked us to massacre children on the scale of June 16th and after was something utterly incredible, totally inhuman. In a way, 1976 caught us unprepared.
Young people came out in their hundreds, if not thousands. We said, what do we do with them? The numbers were so big, and they kept on coming. They kept on coming.
We didn't have the facilities to handle so many. It was fortunate that the uprising came at a time when two more states in Southern Africa had become independent. Mozambique in 1975, and Angola also in 1975.
The immediate results was that we had now our own training camps in Angola.
Are you prepared to fight?
I'm very much prepared to fight.
I ask myself who will bring me freedom. And I tell myself, it is myself.
We wanted to be out of the country for about 3-4 months and come back. Train, come back and fight, that's all. I remember Joe Modise saying to us, the easiest thing for the ANC to do would be to train all of you and take you back to the borders of South Africa and say, go in. But you'll be massacred in a day.
Good morning, comrades. First thing you've got to tell them that we look at our struggle basically as a political struggle. And even the operation when you go home, your main task is to educate people politically.
For the benefit of all the people of South Africa. Great!
And we were not so keen to learn all this thing. we knew exactly what we wanted. Let me train in how to use a gun and then come back and shoot that policeman in my township.
Naturally, young people are impatient. They want to do things now and quickly. So these old people just are wasting our time. They must give us these things, and when we'll fix it up. What we need to do is to take them on board, but as much as possible, Tambo himself would address them.
I was told that I was going to meet O.R. Tambo. He immediately says, tell me more about South Africa and how you feel and what is happening there and what are your views. He makes me feel that whatever it is that I'm going to be saying to him, it is important.
He came to address us and he sat down on the floor. And you know, when you're young and they're looking at this person and awe, and there is in this very smart suit, he sits on the ground just like that. And I say, we're impressed. You see, and these are revolutionaries.
He articulated his thoughts with precision. You could see it's a person who says exactly what he means. And of course, we also observed his brisk walk, the manner in which his eyes moved, and all of us were just awestruck by what we were seeing.
Members of Umkhonto we see in our country, comrades, you will remember the society is divided along racial lines.
We must not allow the enemy to determine the character of our struggle. Our struggle shall not proceed along racial lines.
Our enemy is the white government in South Africa. And we get to our leadership in exile. We find these senior ANC leaders that are white. How do I react to Slovo? Slovo is my leader, is held in high regard in the ANC. So the clear-cut color enemy was getting destroyed in our young minds.
For young people like us coming from apartheid South Africa, to see the kind of respect that a white person like Joe Slovo gave to Oliver Tambo, a black person, was also quite impressive and unique.
And after a few years, you see, those cadres who came to Hot begin to understand that the struggle is not a question of just taking a rifle and just boom, 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 and shooting in Soweto, or like you do in films. They understand that it's something deeper, more fundamental.
You are the soldiers of our revolution, and it is important to remember you are political soldiers. As political soldiers, you will be expected, like us, to stand here to dedicate your entire life to the struggle for the liberation of our motherland. Some of you will be assigned to fight in the country. Remember, those who confront the racist enemy in our country, your target of attack is the enemy's armed forces, the enemy's industrial base, his lines of communication.
I heard a lot about our guys going into the country, being ambushed by the apartheid forces and being killed.
I remember one time we were being revolting adolescents, and he said to us, you have to understand something. Young people of your age are dying. They're soldiers. They're fighting for the liberation of their country. And my job is to send them out. Your age, your children like you.
He would tell me that I lived a life of luxury compared to the boys in the camps, but I knew that. And I asked him about it because I saw his pain. And he said, you know, I'm responsible to their parents. I send them into danger for a purpose. And so I'm responsible for their parents. And each life, you know, mattered to him tremendously. So he did feel like their father, sending them into battle, and it weighed heavily on him.
You know, he's a father of many other children, the children whose fathers are in jail, the children who have been orphaned during the struggle, and our children have learned to share their father with the other children.
When he would come, my mother and him would talk for hours through the night into the next morning. Sometimes I would hear them singing hymns for like 3 hours. Seriously, 3 hours in their bedroom, just singing hymns together.
He was married to the struggle, and he had a very, very deep sense of duty and understanding of the importance of the role that he had to play. And we were tremendously proud of what he was doing.
I would sometimes say to him as he was leaving, "Give him hell, Dad," you know. And one time he came back into the house and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You know, kill him. Kill the bastards," you know, and all of this. I said, no, that's not what we're about. These are South Africans. We're not fighting them as people. We're fighting the system of apartheid.
The South African situation is an act of violence against the majority. Physical violence, psychic violence, spiritual violence. The world is expecting the apartheid system to be dropped, to be dismantled. And the indications are that it is there to stay. And so the people are putting on new energies into the struggle that has been going on.
As soon as we intensified they got nervous. P.W. Porter and his generals came out with a strategy of total war.
South Africa started coming out, the regime started coming out to attack what they called ANC bases outside. This was a new level.
The states of Southern Africa must realize that what they can do to us, we can do to them. Only much more efficiently and effectively.
They attacked Mozambique, Maputo, Matola raids. They would kidnap people in the frontline states, and they even went to war in Angola.
They bombed infrastructure, bridges, railway bridges, road bridges. They bombed petrol storage tanks. And of course, one day, at about 11, one Saturday morning, we heard bombs, brew, 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 brew. The greatest shock of my life. There were 600 people dead. But that is the price we had to pay.
So they risked their national independence, they risked their sovereignty, they risked their economy, they risked actually their whole future by fighting apartheid. Very few situations in history where you've seen so many poor countries who just come out into freedom and then throw their lot in with a liberation struggle.
I remember the NEC meeting when the news arrived in the middle of the meeting that the Maseru massacre had taken place. We were so incensed with that massacre. Oliver Tambo said to the meeting, he is going to attend the funeral in Lesotho. Now, Lesotho is surrounded by South Africa, and there's no way to get in here except to cross over land or fly over South African airspace. And so first we tried to oppose him, and he wouldn't listen to us. He said, you can't talk about people not being intimidated if we, the leaders, are not there. And I have to be there. And the president of Mozambique, Samora Machel, heard this, and he called OR. Oliver, you're not going to Lesotho. You, the president, the struggle depends on you. You're not going to take a reckless decision. So I'm not going to allow you, he said, to go. And OR again had to sit down and debate with the late Samora Machel and prevailed. He said, I am going. I am going. None of you are going to stop me. He went and he publicly addressed the funeral. Publicly addressed the funeral.
Joe Slovo said to me one day, you must talk to Oliver because he's killing himself by his overwork. For instance, there's a man who comes to him in the camp in Lusaka and talks for 15 minutes about his mother-in-law's problems with her teeth. This is to the President General of the African National Congress. And he insists on seeing people. And, you know, his system won't take it. And the next opportunity I spoke to Oliver and I said, you know, there's no purpose in your killing yourself. And he said, and you are always telling me about how estranged leaders become from their following. What do you want me to do if people want to see me? These are precisely the people with whom I ought to remain in communication.
He said something that all of us remembered. I want to show you that what remains of my health will be consumed by the struggle. Just that commitment has remained etched in my memory about the purpose of life. And I think Oliver Tambo answers that beautifully.
In the 80s, Oliver Tambo said this is a decade of liberation. So this notion is there in the heads of all of us, that this decade of the 80s is a decade of liberation.
We have got to keep going. A general build-up of a massive force in our country that says no to apartheid. A new South Africa now, today, not tomorrow.
You are tuned to Radio Freedom, the voice of the African National Congress.
The time has come that the rest of the black masses of our country, all 25 million of us, should join in one determined offensive to make all of our country ungovernable.
The people are rising up, not just in the main urban centers, but in small, seldom heard of towns, spreading.
Organizations were springing out, the unions were emerging in a more powerful way. Strikes became a feature of our struggle in this country. Youth organizations were mushrooming all over the place, and as well as women's formations.
It is a rejection, a mass rejection of the system, a demand for a new order that must spread to envelop the whole country. Everybody must go on the attack.
We are determined to be that generation that is going to create a new society.
The struggle had reached a point in South Africa, within the country, where we could not provide effective leadership from a great distance. It needed senior people from the national executive level to come in and live in South Africa and interact with the forces and give political and military leadership. So, Oliver and Slovo were to undertake the work of sending such people into the country. The idea was that we would make contact with people and ensure that those who were prepared to be involved in the struggle and committed to the policy of the movement got organized into viable, safe structures and did work. From printing inside the country, having political classes and discussion about policy and ways forward, interacting with the civic organizations that were sprouting in the country so that they got leadership. Secondly, get people out for training, political and military, and intelligence. And then those coming in from outside would have a structure into which they could be absorbed when they got into the country.
We began now to impact inside the country. We're sending more cadres to engage the enemy in military operations. We went for their military headquarters. We attacked police stations at a number of points. We planted explosives and destroyed their installations.
20 people were hurt in the latest bomb attack. 15 bombs have gone off in urban areas this year, nearly half of them since the state of emergency began 3 weeks ago.
Because of his personality, very peaceful and peaceable. This role in armed struggle sometimes is not fully appreciated. He would ensure that some symbolic military activity takes place in order to drive home a particular political message.
Our armed actions were always directed at mass mobilization. Always with our armed actions, we're communicating with our people and saying they must fight on two fronts and combine two sectors of struggle, armed struggle and political action. These two complemented and supplemented each other.
Because they were beginning to feel our impact inside the country. the need to destroy the ANC anywhere where it reared its head, whether it's Botswana, Zambia, London.
The offices in which we're sitting have been bombed. Does your wife worry about you?
Well, I'm sure she does. She does. Every wife would. She does. The children do. Everybody else do. My colleagues worry about me in the ANC. But I myself expect, I really do expect, that I will be killed by the regime or its agents.
There were definitely lots of agents, and they were very clever. And the special branch played them accordingly. So you can't get away from needing a very strict code of security.
So he was ever so isolated. I remember once in Arusha, Tanzania, I came to an hotel and he was with his bodyguards on the upper floor and he could see nobody until I managed to get in. And he was ever so relieved. It was like seeing a prisoner.
One day I get a phone call. Hello. President Oliver Tambo on the line. He said, we have a problem. We have captured a number of agents sent by Pretoria to destroy the organization. And there's nothing in the statutes of the ANC about how we should deal with them. A week later, I'm in Lusaka, taken to the office, and he said, we use torture. The bleak face, quietly. I can't believe it. We're fighting for freedom. We use torture. And he asked me to draft a code of conduct for the ANC. So that's how the code of conduct emerged. It was on Oliver Tambo's direction and instructions.
Ethics might have been even more important to Oliver Tambo than politics. And it is his ethical approach to life that drove him to politics and made him the person that he was.
The ANC must continue to make sure that our revolutionary struggle is revolutionary in every respect and obeys the rules of any revolution, follows definite defined rules. A revolutionary behaves in a certain kind of way and is distinguished and distinguishable from the criminal, from the vigilante, from the enemy agent. And he doesn't have to debase himself. It's the system who are the criminals of our country. We must destroy the system, and then the criminals will go.
I must be emphatic on this. I'm going to keep order in South Africa. And nobody in the world is going to stop me from keeping order.
Before the end comes, we expect rivers of blood to flow. The streams have started. And it will take the international community only. We are helpless to restrict the duration of the slaughter.
The role that he played in forging one of the biggest global movements, I think it's one of the major achievements that anyone globally had ever made.
All over the world were these anti-apartheid movements.
I mean, in India, in Japan, in Canada. So many people for the same cause. Millions and millions it must have been.
It was the largest and most successful social justice movement of the 20th century.
We had created a climate internationally. It was directly related to what was happening at home. As struggle escalated in the country, you got greater support.
There is a total onslaught against South Africa. To destabilize our country and to make us give in and to make us accept dictates from outside.
Irrespective of the international consequences, we will not be untrue to our forefathers, to our beliefs, to our values. Come what may, we will resist these by diabolical forces. It doesn't matter what is the cost.
Progressively, the regime is running into a deeper and deeper crisis. A political crisis, an economic crisis. And this is the result of the combination of these two forces, international pressure and internal struggle.
The forces in the world to isolate South Africa was making it less and less creditworthy. The country was becoming, quote, unbankable. And I wanted out.
President Reagan has fought long and hard to prevent Congress from imposing new economic sanctions against South Africa. Recently, even leaders of his own party begged him to stop. He didn't. Today, he lost. The Senate joined the House in overriding Mr. Reagan's veto.
And if the United States could pass through that act, it had rippling effect.
General Motors pulled out, Ford pulled out, a number of the pharmaceutical companies pulled out, the entertainment companies pulled out, the banks pulled out. It was a blow because one felt desperately isolated. And that left a sinking feeling, and certainly in my stomach.
I was watching one day on television the Deputy Governor of the South African Reserve Bank. He said, trade boycotts never affected us. Always been ways around that. He said, but financial sanctions are killing us. And you know, if you can't get loans rolled over and all sources of foreign exchange are denied you and you're a modern industrial state of a sort, you're in deep trouble.
And I think that, quite literally, the apartheid state was becoming bankrupt.
Three South African business leaders flew to the neighboring country of Zambia today for unprecedented talks on the future of their country with black guerrilla leaders outlawed by the South African government. The businessmen who control much of South Africa's vast wealth were acting independently of their government.
I had the conventional view of the ANC as the devil incarnate. White-hating, murderous, terrorist, communists, Moscow-dominated puppets. I mean, this was the common perception of them.
The meeting was held behind the closed gates of a game reserve in the dry bush of eastern Zambia. The white businessmen represented the highest levels of South Africa's non-government power structure. A year ago, it would have been unthinkable and indicates business's deep concern that the end is coming.
Naturally, the South African businessmen gravitated towards one side of the circle and the ANC on the other side of the circle. And the ice was broken when Oliver Tambo made some quip about the division, the apartheid of the seating arrangements, if you liked, at which stage everybody burst out laughing and we mixed in. The ANC executive, at least a half of them, were members of the South African Communist Party. We were concerned about this. You know, we're businessmen, we're capitalists. But they said that the communists on the ANC executive were ANC members first and Communist Party members second. and that the ANC was not a communist organization. They used Sweden as an example of a model democracy. I was surprised at that. It was obvious to me that the ANC had an overwhelming nostalgia to return to South Africa, which they were then unable to do, and I found it very easy to like them on a personal level.
We admired the fact that this group of business leaders decided to come to Lusaka, notwithstanding expressions of disapproval by P.W. Botha. We thought it was a recognition on their part that it's not really going to be possible to resolve the problems of South Africa without involving the ANC.
No question that it was a turning point. I mean, I think what happened is that we lit the fuse, and then it just ran from there on. And meetings with the ANC then became, over a period of probably 18 months, flavor of the month.
We had a meeting with a group of leading Afrikaner personalities. I remember them reporting that the then Minister of Finance, he had reported to Cabinet that indeed the whole system of apartheid was becoming financially unaffordable.
There was a meeting in my home in Walton-on-Thames of Oliver, Tambo and Becky, myself, and Christopher Ball, who was head of Barclays Bank in South Africa.
And the chairman of Barclays Bank said that by the year 1990, the country, South Africa, must be well on the way towards the resolution of this problem of apartheid.
And Oliver shook Chris's hand and said, I want to tell you how honored I am to have met you. And my reaction was one of absolute shock. If anyone was honored by that, Chris Ball was. But for him, any white in Chris Ball's position who could bring himself so far as to understand what the Africans were fighting for deserved honoring.
He wasn't looking for enemies to smite. His whole approach was build up the number of friends you have and neutralize the enemies. And if necessary, create space for the enemies now to enter into dialogue and transform and change.
And shortly after this, Barclays disinvested.
Good evening. One of Britain's biggest investors in South Africa, Barclays Bank, have announced that they're selling up.
It's the largest pullout of foreign business to date in South Africa, which has already seen.
Britain has done an about-turn on its policy on South Africa. It's offered to meet Oliver Tambo, the leader of the African National Congress. It'll be the first meeting between a minister and a representative of the organisation, which is banned in South Africa.
Mr. Tambo, could we ask you to come to the microphone, sir?
What are you doing here?
Right, we're hoping you're going to tell us something.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You have turned me into a little film star.
This man, Oliver Tambo, who the Reagan administration once considered a communist and a terrorist, became a Washington VIP today, a symbol of the administration's abrupt shift from a policy of dealing exclusively with South Africa's white minority government to opening a dialogue with the black nationalists determined to destroy it.
He had a high sense of values, integrity, a sharp mind, very strategic, and also extremely diplomatic.
He's a terrific guy, and we had a great time. It was a good meeting from my standpoint. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the depth of feelings of the ANC. I learned that the stereotype of communism, terrorism was not anywhere near the mainstream of their thinking.
He was in leadership not by accident. He came into leadership because of the capacity and the capabilities that he had as an individual. And in a sense, one can even argue that leaders of Oliver Tambo's caliber were so good that they helped raise the movement to their level.
Tambo's approach to the struggle was a very organic, interactive one, and he understood the value of all dimensions. We use the term 4 pillars of struggle: the mass political, the underground, MK activity reinforcing political, and international solidarity, where he was a keynote speaker internationally from the United Nations all over the world.
On one front reinforces the struggle.
And finally this evening, our person of the week, Oliver Tambo, the president of the African National Congress.
What is the difference that Oliver Tambo makes to the struggle? Tell me what you think are your strengths.
My political strength, I think, lies in the truth. I am simply what I am. I don't try to be anything else.
You're described as a reluctant revolutionary. Is that just a cliche?
No, I think it is, because if being a revolutionary involves a fervent desire and determination to see radical change, I am that.
Do you ever have any time for yourself?
Not really.
Do you have a family?
I have.
Are they proud of their father?
I get the sense that they are immensely proud of their father. I get that impression. They are.
Give us a prediction for the end of the decade.
Really, as I see it, I will be back in South Africa. I have a strong belief that not only is it never going to be the same again, but that we are in fact moving to the new era. I think there are many indications that apartheid cannot hold on any longer.
Creating ungovernability, giving people courage, so the mass actions should intensify. But also sending a message that the ANC has developed the capacity where we could make the system dysfunctional. I think it's that approach that sent the message that if negotiations did not happen, we would then have a scorched earth in South Africa.
The negotiations are definitely coming. What's that? The regime is bound to say we're ready to talk. So OR says, now let's prepare a proposal.
At this stage, there's discussions going on in prison between Madiba and the government. When OR heard that there's some talks going on, he was deeply concerned. He said, what is important is that the regime must not have an opportunity to divide us.
I agreed with Oliver to develop an entire new communication system. And through that, I linked Nelson Mandela with Oliver Tambo.
Now, OR was just ecstatic. He sent an exhaustive briefing in which he outlined the dangers of negotiation, what the different maneuvers are. Nelson says, I am talking to the regime to negotiate with the ANC, not with me. I am saying to them that the ANC is the ANC represented by Tambo, based in Lusaka.
We have said the first step, the very first one, which would lead us to consider the possibility of negotiations as a realistic way out of the situation, would be the release of Nelson Mandela and other political prisoners.
The regime would keep you isolated from each other, and yet the struggle demanded that you should never be disunited. That unity was key to success. What is remarkable is that these men never lost faith in each other. that even totally isolated from each other, they would be able to be on the same wavelength of thinking. That's extremely unusual.
A landmark point would be the drawing up of the Harare Declaration, where the possibility of negotiating rather than fighting to the bitter end arose. The question was, what do you put on the table? What were you fighting for?
Omar explained to us that people from all over the world were asking, what does the ANC have in mind for a future constitution for South Africa? We had the Freedom Charter, but the Freedom Charter just set out a vision. Their big problem was the whites are there, they're a small minority, they've treated the majority badly, and now they're fearful that if there's majority rule, they're going to be driven into the sea, and how can a constitution protect them?
The things we were fearing in South Africa was that they would demand some kind of racial seats or a racial franchise. That if you want to give security to whites who feel threatened, give them some special seats, give them some privileges. And if the South African government got the support of Britain and others for those policies, we were sunk. The fact it didn't happen was also a reflection of the astute diplomacy of Oliver Tambo, of Thabo Mbeki and the people in exile talking to these leaders.
We are all South African citizens of equal worth. We are not talking about black majority. We are talking about democratic majority in a country comprising one people, not whites and blacks as such, but simply the people of South Africa.
The rights of everybody are protected, but not because you're black or white or brown, because you're a person, a human being. We take it for granted, but it wasn't taken for granted then. And that was very much Oliver Tambo's core insistence that really became foundational to our whole constitutional order.
The idea that the Constitution should talk not only about the one generation of human rights, which is political, but also other generations of human rights, social, economic, environmental, gender, and so on, that idea came directly from Oliver Tambo.
Tambo was, in that sense, I don't have to say the father of the Constitution because that gives a gender connotation to it, but he was truly the key person in terms of determining the fundamental features of our new constitutional order at a time when it really mattered.
So the Harare Declaration is a reflection of how OR thought you've got to present a position.
We must avoid a situation where the process of negotiating the future of South Africa gets taken over by some other people. That therefore we needed to tie the world to our own vision of what should happen.
He had worked night and day tirelessly, and he had written to consult people, including Mandela, on the draft.
The Harare Declaration was more than just a statement of principles. It had great strategic and instrumental value in requiring Pretoria to take steps swiftly to release political prisoners, allow the exiles to return, and permit free political activity.
And he had said, we are preparing this as a strategic perspective on negotiations, but I don't want it to be seen as an ANC document. I want the OAU to take it to the United Nations, to have the United Nations adopt it as the United Nations document. Because if we do it as an ANC document, already people will oppose it. We want the whole world behind this perspective of the negotiated solution.
He'd been traveling throughout the frontline states and further afield, to meticulously brief every single leader about the ANC's change of tack. Didn't spare himself one iota.
We then contacted our own people at home here, UTF, to say to them, you people need to be part of this. Come to the meeting of the OAU, which will approve this.
That was OR's crowning achievement because he steered the process that would say, in spite of all the dangers, this is how South Africa should move through negotiation to a democracy. OR returned to Lusaka, got the Harare Declaration virtually signed and sealed, ready for formal approval. And one day before that meeting, he has the stroke.
In the camp, it was not whether he had suffered, it was like he has died. I mean, we were in mourning, I don't know for how many months.
The whole movement was so concerned and depressed and worried. And, you know, things were now beginning to happen. And that stroke came about through the hard work he put in on the Harare document, the Harare Accord, the whole negotiation approach.
He was very sharp. His mind was still very, very sharp. And it left his speech behind. You could see his ideas, you could see him talking, but he's still trying to phrase a sentence when actually is ahead in his thought. It was very frustrating. I was the chief rep in Stockholm. I said, well, let me talk with the Swedes and see if they could invite over to Sweden so that the doctors can really work on him.
He was professor among all the other patients being rehabilitated from their strokes.
Even after his stroke, without a hitch, the Harare Declaration. It was a document taken to the United Nations, endorsed there. And that is why, in negotiating with the apartheid regime, we had a blueprint that was on the table and no more.
So if you really want the architect of the South African transition, then it's Oliver Tambo.
You need two things to keep an iniquitous regime alive. You need an inadequate resistance to it, and you need a confident, united backing for the regime. And apartheid lost both virtually together, interrelatedly.
I am now in a position to announce that Mr. Nelson Mandela will be released at the Victor Verster prison on Sunday, the 11th of February, at about 3 p.m.
And they came here because of Oliver Tambo, to see him. That was the first journey abroad.
It was an emotional occasion. It was like, is it true? Are you out of prison? Is it true? Is that you, Comrade Oliver Tambo?
Oliver could walk, talked with great difficulty.
And they mostly embraced each other, and they stood hand in hand, and they just beamed like two happy children, seeing each other after such an enormously long time.
Madiba would come towering and, "Oh, comrade!" All the speeches each one of them has made will never be as meaningful as that first hug.
Oh, it was sweet to see them together. They were like boys. It's like all the, because they were both old men, but it was as if they were just back to being young men again. Oh, it was wonderful to see the excitement. And they just, chat. And oh, there was so much catching up to do, and they were joking with each other.
After 27 years, they haven't talked directly to each other. They have so much ground to cover. They would never sleep. The only way to make them sleep was to separate them, painful as it was.
And there was this beautiful little scene that played out as we were all leaving because they led us. And Dad says to Uncle Nelson, "After you," as they're going through this door. He says, no, after you. He says, "No, I insist, after you." And they kept this up, and everybody else was in fits of laughter because neither of them would go through first. For me, it symbolized the respect, the love between them. When they left, my father said to my mum, "It'll be 5 years." Now, 30 years later, we're on a plane going back with him to South Africa.
It was magic. It was answered prayer.
Literally, as we came across the border from Botswana, the pilot announced to the plane, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have now entered the borders of South Africa." Everybody started crying and cheering, my dad, my mum, and it was perhaps the most emotional plane journey of our lives.
The airport was at a standstill. There were crowds and crowds of people. But the fact that he was there and he was waving, and he seemed to be in very good health, was very, very gratifying.
Tambo,
Comrades and friends, I wish to pay a special tribute to all of you here and to many more around the world. Finally, I want to thank my wife, Adelaide, and my family. They gave me the love and the support I could not have survived without. Commander! 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 Commander!
The Electoral Commission has reported that it is satisfied in announcing the election of Comrade Nelson Mandela to the post of President.
You have entrusted me with the presidency of the ANC.
It will not be very easy for me to follow the giant footsteps of Comrade O.R.
He paved the way forward with gold, the gold of his humanity, his warmth, his democratic spirit, tolerance, and above all, intellectual brilliance,
which in the end outwitted the racists in this country. No struggle depends on one person, but there are exceptions to every rule. Comrade O.R. is that exception.
There is not enough rain in the skies for us to be able to shower on him the honor he deserves.
Things didn't go the way they were supposed to go. So he didn't see democracy.
Let all of us who live say that while we live, the ideals for which Oliver Tambo lived, sacrificed and died, will not die. We have it in our power to remake South Africa into what you wanted it to be: free, just, prosperous, at peace with itself and with the world. We will not fail you.
The whole of Africa lost something when he died. Oliver Tambo was in a class of his own. We have lost a truly great man.
What I personally would be certain of is that under the leadership of an Oliver Tambo, you wouldn't have the kind of divisions that the ANC has been experiencing. Oliver Tambo's character would have been his force of example under current conditions that would have discouraged some of the tendencies that we're experiencing today. That is something that we need to take from his life.
We can learn as young people that leadership is not about being elected, about chest thumping, is about what comes out of you, what it is that you put into society for a better life. And OR was that kind of a person.
I think every leader who wants to be accepted as a leader, if they were to learn from OR, it would be A, that integrity is paramount. the attributes of Tambo as a diplomat, debater, strategist, good politician, sportsman in his time, swimmer, horseman, a musician, really talented, but ultimately just such a good human being.
When we cast our vote in Wattville, which is where, of course, my parents had lived before they went into exile. So it was me and my brother and sister and my mother. It was a real privilege to be able to do it there and to remember him. And of course, his grave was not far from us. So we felt that he was there with us. The most important thing that I learned from my father is that you must never sit still for injustice. It doesn't matter. It can be someone jumping in front of someone else in a queue. Don't keep quiet. Because when you start to get used to keeping quiet, you'll never open your mouth.
It does cause you to reflect a lot and think about the life you've had when your father passes, you know, and all the things that could have been if it had been a normal life. But once they're gone, they're gone. So I cherish the memories. I still, when I go to his grave, talk to him. Because my mother used to. She'd tell my father about how Dali's doing, how Tembi's doing, Salani and the staff member and this one and the driver. And that's been our family tradition. And now that they're both in that grave, I speak to both of them. And what is beautiful is that my children now do the same thing.
Shona Malanga, Shona, Shona Malanga, Shona Malanga, Shona, Shona, Shona Malanga, Shona Malanga, Shona, Tibana, 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 Shona Malanga, Shona, Shona Malanga, Shona Malanga, Shona, Shona, Shona Malanga, Shona Malanga, Shona, Tibana, Tibana, yo yo, yo yo, yo yo, yo yo, yo yo, yo luta continua, yo yo, yo yo, yo yo,
Comrades, I've attempted to messages. Sorry, let me just switch this off. Apologies about that, but I attempted to go through some of your messages, like in the chat group, over about 150. And I really think it wouldn't be doing justice if I even tried to summarize or even read all of those. But certainly I am very, very much heartened by the comments made. One has been that you'll actually get access to the tape, and it must be also reflected in the school's curriculum. So certainly on the part of the school's curriculum, be reflective of some of the thinking vision and outlook of OR Tambo, President Oliver Tambo, that I can certainly confirm as a matter of fact that, you know, ultimately OR Tambo School wants to produce cadres with a world outlook, cadres who understand how the world works. And whether you become a counselor, whether you are a leader in an NGO, you find spaces, you should be able to place in which you are and what purpose. Also, that the rights to this Tambo Foundation, not OR Tambo School, you are welcome to approach them directly to see how it can be made available. I mean, I've got a copy here. So this is something that you probably should be able to get off the shelf somewhere. But I also believe that same is on YouTube. If you go to the OR Tambo School's Facebook page right now, we've provided a link there of this video, so you'll be able to get it there. We still have a few minutes before 2 o'clock, comrades, I see. Our session is meant to end by 2 p.m. So I'm open really to the idea of opening the floor to some few comments, not more than 2 minutes. If you like, you know, what have you observed from the session? What have you learned? You know, what are you taking away from yourself here? What can you advise the rest of us about what to do? Because I think ultimately that's the fundamental question here. That when you hear about the glowing, the beautiful person that OR Tambo was, the very spirit, the soul that he carried with him, what does it say to us today? And practically, what are the things that we should be doing? I mean, I think it's Comrade Joel who are saying that OR Tambo's approach to ethics, his ethical approach to life, that's probably the thing that brought him into politics. So is there anything for us to take for ourselves from there? And there are many other points that were raised. I mean, I think there's a glaring question, I think, for us, and hopefully we'll deal with this in next weekend's UMRABULO. There's a glaring question about unity of the ANC, because OR Tambo, on the one hand, of course, spoke about unity of the ANC, but it was also linked to the idea of unity in South Africa. So it was not unity for unity's sake. You know, the attitude of talking to those that we originally would have considered our foes and try to bring them closer to the cause that we want to put this country on. Let me not attempt and go on, because I could probably speak on and on about OR commerce. So let me and rather give 2 minutes, please, not more than 2 minutes. Ajit, the floor is yours.
No, thank you very much, JP. Thank you very much, JP.
Yes.
I really look, Molweni Kabani, good day to everyone. You know, I'm so deeply emotional having watched this video today. And I think the strong take-home message for me, comrades, is that it is the servant leadership that we really need to start putting forward into the organization. And it's not about our positions that we're fighting for and our economic prosperities. It's about serving our people. And I really want to thank you very, very much for giving me the opportunity to watch this really very emotional video. And I wish you well. Thanks very much, Comrade JP.
Thank you, Comrade Leah.
Good evening, Comrade JP and the comrades. Comrade JP, this is an outstanding political lecture that we have received today. We really appreciate the effort of the OR Tambo School that is doing in ensuring that we calcate our political consciousness back to us. What I have learned from this video is that in the life of Comrade OR, as well as Comrade Mandela and the entire Rivonia trialists, their program was to mobilize the society in totality. And you see the video that is, you see all the race, you're black, you're white, you're Indian, moving to the same struggle of the liberation of the people of South Africa. And I think the Constitution yet also assists us that when we're saying we're a non-racial society or we're a non-racial movement, the ANC has got a responsibility to also go back and attract these other race so that we become indeed a non-racial society, because our branches lately, we feel as if the struggle belongs to Black people only, while the Constitution and the values of Comrade OR indicates that indeed the struggle of South Africa is the struggle for everyone. So that is what I have learned, and we must also push it to ensure that we become the really non-racial society of South Africa for the benefit of everybody who's living in South Africa. And this must also go down to the young people, because if young people are not calculated with this information, indeed our history remains in these documentaries and remains with us, while our young people, those that are still in school in particular, to understand where do we come from with this liberation and why we must continue with the struggle. Thank you very much, Comrade JP.
Thank you, Comrade Leah. Quite a vexing question there. This issue of race, which has also taken on a very populist tone in our country. It's like Black people at all costs. And then in that process, we dump. I mean, I belong in an NC branch. The minute you say a white person has been appointed at ESCOM, there's all arms and things being thrown around. But is that really what the ANC is? To say that we want to do away with white people, or we want to redress in a manner that deals with the wrongs of the past, but also at the same time not saying that we are saying white people should go into this. I think an issue that needs quite a bit of focus, comrades. So, Comrade Kungile, you're on the floor.
Yes, thanks, Comrade Chairperson, Comrade JP, and I greet everyone. Comrade Chair, we can make various perceptions from watching this video, because we are individual and we're going to observe it differently. But obviously there is a baseline, and that is the very same base that our comrade voluntarily go and join the ANC currently. And they are committed, Comrade JP, but the truth is circumstances have changed and the situation has changed. Our comrades are in control of resources. And now this is the very same resources that kills the very same struggle of renewal and development in South Africa. The very same resources we are handling are the very same resources we are unable to control and to take us forward. So I'll continue, Comrade JP. It's just that I put a long text on your chart. My point is we need to really look at benefits that we are going to offer our comrades. And I know in any struggle, any suggestion will sound as impossible as you might think of it, but the reality of the matter, our comrades are handling resources, therefore they need to be compensated for the legacy that they will be handling, meaning, Comrade JP, that put those securities there for them in order for their kids and everyone else that they are in total looking out for in their families would eventually benefit, because that's the status that we are living in. And obviously that will be reviewed in time, because we are living in a really fast evolution. So obviously we will need now to always be on the lookout of what needs to be done. I've watched in the video that there was a point where an ANC couldn't take a decision until our grandfather come down if I remember, in one of these base countries, to reunite the organization, to give direction to the organization. So there will be obviously moments like that where you need to take now an unpopular decision. It's as long as it's good to save our organization. I would love you to just read that chart. Basically, I'm trying to summarize it, Comrade JP, and I think it is important for our comrade. And our comrade must not continue to say, you serve freely, we have this heart, but now we've seen comrades from your EFF even are getting paid by comrades in our organization. So definitely there is a temptation. So let's not run away. And those people genuinely, they want to serve those organizations, but there is a trap of an economic affordability that our comrades need to be taken care of. Thank you,
Okay.
Comrade JP.
Yeah, comrades, I'm going to appeal, comrades, that we just go for up to about 2:05, because I really want to take all of the 3 remaining hands and appeal to you to be really very brief. But Comrade Kungile, I think there's a discussion for us to be held around the issue of value vis-a-vis the notion of culture, by the way. Because correctly, like you say, they say culture is not static. So indeed, things cannot, in 2020, can't even be defined in the line of things of 2010, not even before 1994. I mean, if somebody who passed away, for example, in 2005 had to wake up, they'll probably be surprised that we're having this type of like Zoom meeting and the kind of activity we have on spaces like Facebook and Twitter and so on. So I really take the point that you are making. I think that we need to probably at some point come back to this discussion of something like value that doesn't change. So what are those values that should be reflected in us today vis-a-vis the culture of where we are living in today? You know, some of us some time ago used to volunteer in NGOs, used to work in South African NGO Coalition and so on. Is it actually still practical on this day and time? But point taken. So comrades, I can really not take any more hands. I'm going to take the only 3 that I had, Comrade Joshua, Gift, and Jonas. Appeal to them to not go over a minute. I'm sorry, Comrade Ernest, and anybody else who comes. But this is not the last time, comrades. Next week, again, at 12 o'clock, we're doing this again. So please join us then again in conversation. Comrade Joshua?
Thanks, Comrade JP. Very powerful lecture that we're having today. And I think most of us, while we were watching the video, we conducted some self-introspection. But what I wanted to raise in terms of what I've observed, Comrade JP, is that the generation of our stalwarts, they had a mission and a purpose to achieve, which was to really get our people who were oppressed into a country that is democratic. And they've achieved their objective. And as part of the program of the NDR, it was important that we go over that first leap of democratically emancipating our people. And now we have the second transition, which is economic transformation. And the real challenge lies with us in how we're going to be able to work around achieving economic transformation. I was covered by Comrade Leah in terms of how we need to also look at uniting other races to be part of our organization. Also, how to stay relevant to our youth of today. I think that's where we find opposition taking that space, such as the EFF and all other small formations. So yeah, Comrade JP, in my view is that we can't get stuck when we are in the second transition of the NDR, which is obviously economic transformation, making sure how we leverage with the state resources, how we utilize them to change people's lives. So this has really given us a platform where we see that the real challenge lies with us. Thanks, Comrade JP.
Thank you. Comrade Gift, we're already on 2 o'clock, so I have to give you the floor and insist that you have to be brief. Comrade Gift?
No, I will be brief, Comrade JP. I think most of the speakers have covered me, but I think the video also reflected that our forebears always stood for non-racialism, and they were against African chauvinism. And I think it's upon us now to generate that interest and ensure that we also promote non-racialism in the ANC. And we must also fight against African chauvinism, including nationalism, because the African National Congress is not an Africanist movement. And I think this was just an eye-opener. But quickly, Comrade JP, quickly avail this video to all the provinces, because I think this was very educative for all those who were participants in this lecture. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, leader. We'll look into that. Thank you for the kind words, Comrade Gift. Comrade Jonas Boshomani, you're on the floor, my leader.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade JP. And let me join colleagues. We really appreciate your efforts insofar as the lecture is concerned. Well, one interesting aspect that I think we can take home from this lecture, when he was asked, who are you? And he said, I'm myself. He could have said, I'm a former teacher. He could have said, I'm a former lawyer. I'm a leader. He could have said a lot of things, but he chose to say, I'm myself, probably a volunteer of the ANC. In my view, that is very profound. Today, comrades get into the organization, assume responsibility, and what do you see? Why, when you move around, you hear comrades are called chief, commander, general. You know, comrades have moved away from just being themselves and members of the ANC and volunteers. And I think for me, that was a very huge lesson. The ability to embrace and work with everybody and reduce yourself to the level of those that, in my view, could actually be your subordinates. And that gives you also the chance to listen when you are talked to and consider all views. For me, it also says we're from different backgrounds in the ANC. You've got educators, you've got lawyers, you've got doctors, you've got chiefs, you've got traditional leaders, pastors, and all those people. So the ANC is very big. Thanks.
Okay, I'm feeling very bad now, Comrade Ernest. You're the last lead that I said I wouldn't recognize you, but let me give you the floor, leader. You're our last speaker, Comrade Ernest, 1 minute. Okay,
Thanks, Chair.
not more than that.
Thanks for accommodating me. No, I just wanted to comment how
Sure, Comrade Ernest. Please go ahead.
that we don't need to intellectualize things, how simple this was today, that everybody can identify with. And I think, as some others already said, it makes us to introspect. And I think we need to know where is it what we want to go, what do we want to achieve today, and harness all our resources in that. And that we should make this more widely available, I think. And I think Gomez was saying to bring whites into the organization or others. It's not to bring them in, it's to bring them back, but we've alienated them through unnecessary actions by making things complicated. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, comrades. I think we should end it on that note. I'm always very jealous about time. We are at 3 minutes past 2 now, but I really, really want to sincerely extend my gratitude for all of you for joining today. From our side, this also was a bit of a test case because we said no speaker, just play a video like this and see how it would go as a form of political education offering probably of UMRABULO as well into the new year. But the response really has been quite brilliant. So thank you all very much. I see the discussions in the chat group. We still encourage that in every session we're having. That's part of what we say that our interaction should continue to happen. It's not just about even the speaker when we have speakers, the views that they hold, but also how you yourself can enrich the discourse around whatever subject matter we're dealing with. Next week, we're hoping again to be back at 12 o'clock on Sunday. We're still continuing around the theme of hashtag OR Tambo month. So please look out during the week for details around what all of that particular week would entail. So on that note, my leaders, I say thank you to all of you and Amanda.
Away to.
Away
to.
Away to.
Thanks,
leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade KP.
Away.
Kata